here we are inside my computer. Wow, the magic of technology. This is the page that I've just scanned in. A quick warning is I'm going to work fairly quickly for a lot of what I do, but that's only because I've covered all of these bits in other tutorials. For example, if you want to know how to get your artwork onto the computer, there's another link, aren't you lucky, on your screen right now. So have a quick look there. But I'm going to take the scan page, I've Control-C'd this selection box, and I'm going to go to File, New. From clipboard, I'm actually going to change that to international paper, A4 sheet at 300 pixels per inch. Okay, that's how Mikey likes to work. Let's go to image rotation, and rotate it by 90 degrees. Zoom in just a touch, and Control V ourselves that layer back on. Excellente. Now we're just going to play around and do a tiny bit of housekeeping. So I'm going to edit, transform, scale this image. And I'm going to just scale it up to fill up a bit more space. Select this lock icon so the width and height scale remains the same. I don't want to distort them too much. Get it to about var. Lovely. And then I'm also going to select this eye on the bottom right, the one without an iris or pupil. Oops, get that about there. And I'm just going to move it with the selection tool just to even out the space just a little bit, because I've got OCDs like that and we need to make sure everything's correct and perfect. Now, this kind of looks like it might be fine to work on, but we're going to make things a bit sharper and better. And if you want to know how to get your line work onto its own layer, which is what I'm about to do, again, another link on the screen right now that tells you all about that in detail, because we're going to just speed through this technique. Although, pay attention if you want, it's a bloody brilliant technique. We're going to make sure we're on the layer that we've scanned in, and we're going to just really dive into the levels from the adjustments option. And we're going to bring the white bit down just off of the main black of this graph here, this chart. And this black tab over here, we're going to drag this bad boy right up to the main lump in the black zone here. And you'll notice to the artwork, it goes from this grey, penciled, filled in area, right up to this really dark sheet. Very nice, very powerful. Okay. Now that we've done that, we're going to click onto our channels icon. Where we've got the RGB, I'm going to hover over the image, hold down Control and give it a left click. And then I'm going to go right up to select and select inverse. That's selected all of the zone that isn't white. Then I'm going to go layer, new layer, oakley dokley. And then I'm going to get a colour which is pure black. And I'm going to paint bucket that in. Excellent. Now that might not seem too obvious what we've done. But if we go back to our layers tab and click off the original, I've now got all the black and none of the white on its own layer in Photoshop. So if I turn off this white background quickly, you can see on this layer we've got just all of our black line work. And that is a great way to have things on here. Excellent start. So I'm going to do a tiny bit of housekeeping on the artwork really quickly. Get the eraser, 100% opacity, small size, maximum hardness, ladies, and zoom right in. And the reason why I want to do this really quickly is this shape here. You'll notice with all the other eyelash zones to all the other bits of art, they're filled in black because it gives it loads of pop for your female anime characters. It's a great start. But in this particular example, I'm just going to show you how you can also work with colour. So it means that I'm just getting rid of these construction lines that we've drawn in with a pen. And I'm just going to be making this. Let's give this a cheeky little zoom in, just a little bit further. Lovely. I'm going to be making this one solid shape that we're going to fill full of colour a little bit later on. So with these different examples that we've got on there, I'm going to show you firstly with this side, my very simple colouring technique for eyes that 9 times out of 10 will do the trick for you. But then we're going to dive into some more detail about light reflections and extra lines in the iris zone and playing around with colours a little bit more. And then we're going to cover throwing in shapes into eyes as well as using colours in a different way. And then hopefully we're going to have a big circular pupil over here full of galaxy type eyes and all sorts of reflections and ting. There's lots of fun that you can have. Now we've got this layer here. I'm going to name it the line layer. Lovely. And what I'm going to do is create a layer below it, which is going to be for our colours and ting. Layer, new layer, colours with a U, because I'm from England where people spell things correctly. Let's not turn that into a debate. I'm going to zoom up to the side just a little bit. And what I like to do firstly, instead of diving straight in, is firstly build up a very basic colour palette to work as from a reference. So let's get our pencil tool out because it's nice and basic. And I'm going to give this character, or it's not a character, it's just an eye. I'm going to make it yellow, a bit like Widowmaker. So if I scroll up just a little bit to this kind of yellowy zone, what I'm going to do for the base colours is I'm not going to select a colour from the very right hand edge of this box because that's where everything's really saturated and bright. We're going to use that later to help create some contrast. I'm certainly not going to go all the way down the grey end where it's not colourful at all, that's too boring. But I'm going to go about 2/3 of the way in. I'm going to pick my colours from roughly this corridor of space. So if I go around about here, this can be our base colour for this part of the eye. Lovely. I'm just going to swatch a blob there. And then if we pop back in, I'm going to create a much darker zone. So I'm going to go right down towards the bottom here. Excellent. That's going to be our darker version. I'm probably going to get almost black as well, just for a tiny bit off there. And then if we go in the other direction, I'm going to create some brighter zones. So we're going to go slightly further to the right to get a slightly brighter area to work with, around about here. And if you stick this all together, you can see how they're contrasting. And then what I like to do to give everything that final pop is you have to move the colour slider ever so slightly and move into a slightly different colour. Even if you picked what colour you want the eyes, if you add a slightly different colour, ever so slightly, so here I'm just going to scroll it right up into a really bright yellow, and I'm going to go right up into the top right corner, so it's really bright, really saturated, and that's going to help give the eye the final bit of pop as well. So, now that we've got our colours down that we're going to play with for this eye, I'm going to zoom in just a touch more, and we're going to create another layer again to actually work on. Now, if we go to layer, new layer, and let's call this one the eye, clever, and I'm going to create a selection zone, and that's going to be just for the iris. So I'm just going to follow this shape round using the polygonal lasso tool. Lovely. We've got that shape in and selected, and then now if I use the colour dropper to select our base colour over here, and grab this pencil, and just fill that in. Brilliant. It doesn't look like too much fun, not too much power going on as of yet, but the fun is yet to happen. We are going to grab ourselves the paintbrush tool. I'm going to make sure that I've got a nice wide brush that's fairly large, as you can see around here, and the hardness is completely dropped off. It's the softest possible brush in this instance. So I'm going to go for the darks first. When you colour in with pencil, if you guys are following this tutorial but you're just still working on paper, go in the other direction. Start with your lighter colours and work your way dark. But I'm on Photoshop and I like to work from dark up to light to really give it some pop. So we're going to go for the first of the darker colours, back to the paintbrush, an opacity around about 14 to 15%. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to make this eye much darker at the top. All the colours are going to be darker as if they're shadowed by the hood, but also to show that there's a load of depth behind the lens of the eye. So I'm just going to create a whole load of strokes across. Because it's a very soft brush, it very, very smoothly blends this colour in, which is really, really useful. So I'm just going to do that loads and loads and loads and loads and loads, satisfied. And then colour dropper the next darker colour down. And again, back to the brush, a bit higher up this time. And just really pushing all of that back into darkness. Excellent. Then if we then go the other way and get the first of our lighter colours, because this colour's a bit more saturated already, we've gone further to the right where it's brighter. When we start to stroke this one into the eye, you'll notice that it starts to come to life a bit. It's almost got this glow as if it's been showered with Mako energy, which is great, but also from Final Fantasy VII, it's not really appropriate here. So let's just tap that one in, and then after a few more taps there, lovely. This is where we get to use that slightly different colour tone. We've gone for the really bright yellow. And this time I'm not going to stroke it around and across. I'm just going to focus on this circle area right in the bottom here. We get that really bright yellow in. And all of a sudden, bang. That eye's got loads of pop and colour. Excellent. So, if we zoom out just a touch, it's going to help as well to give a little bit of colour to the white of the eye as well, or at least a little bit of shading. So because this white of the eye is below the eye layer, we're going to go down and create a new layer as well. Layer, new, the whites of their eyes. Don't shoot until you can see them. Whites of eyes. Excellent. And again, using that lasso tool, I'm just going to really quickly tap in this zone that we're going to be shading in. And the whole point of this is to show that the whole of the eye, not just the iris and the pupil, has a shape and a texture. And by applying a tiny bit of shading and shadow onto the whites of the eye, it's just going to make it all more realistic as well. So we're going to go for a very soft grey, around about that, still with our very soft brush. I'm just going to sweep in along at the top, ever so slightly, to bring that down a notch. Lovely. Just like that. And that's also going to serve another purpose for us as well. It means that now we're going to put the reflections of a white light on top, and it's really going to pop when the whites of the eyes aren't a perfect white as well. Now, to get the white of the eyes on here, we're going to go above the line layer. So another layer again, and working in lots of layers is really, really useful. Reflected lights. Lovely. And by putting it over the line layers, it's going to show that this is light reflecting on a lens. It's going to give it loads of punch. So what I like to do here when I'm doing it in Photoshop is get the lasso tool and get an elliptical shape, something like that. And I'm simply going to paint bucket that in perfect white. Lovely. And then, excellent, all of a sudden this is now a reflective surface with a bit of quality to it. What I like to do though is have it slightly at an angle so it points to the pupil. So let's go to Edit, Transform, Rotate whilst it's still selected, like so. I'll just stick it right up there. Excellent. And then it's always a useful trick to have a second reflection of light as well. And it's still worth having it cover either a bit of dark on the pupil or a bit of dark on the edge. I'm going to go for the edge here. I'm going to go for more of a perfect circle and drop that into white as well. Boom. And just like that, you've got your eye. This is a basic colouring technique, but hopefully it gives you a bit of an idea. We start from the dark colours down to the bottom colours where it's really bright, where the light really pumps out. The bottom colours, if we can make that a slightly different shade of a colour, that really helps make the eye much more interesting. And then we've got our reflections on top. Those are the basics, everybody. I hope you find that useful. About 8 times out of 10, that will probably do the trick for a lot of character art and designs. But this is all about having some fun with the eyes. So let's dive into something a little bit more detailed. Now, what I want to do for this eye is make things maybe a bit more of an aqua blue sort of look to it. So I'm going to go back to our colours layer to make sure I'm working on the right space. I'm going to start playing around with some nice bright blues. In fact, around about here looks lovely. So again, let's select the base colour, not too far to the right at all, around about there, and back to the pencil tool, just so that I can get a quick palette going on. There's our base. Just go straight down here to get our darker version. Lovely. I'm just going to go again and get a drop of almost but not quite black to really play around with. And then let's work our way up as well. Slightly off, slightly up to the right. We've got a very nice, bright, kind of turquoisey, aqua, marine sort of thing going on there. Nice. And what I'm going to do is probably just get a couple other things going on. I'm going to throw in a hint of very dark purple. And I'm going to make it very dark around about here. And I'm barely going to use this at all. But that second colour is really just going to help make this eye a little bit interesting. I'm still keeping it in roughly that blue to green purple zone. And then if we go back to our super brights, I bring that up around about here. I'm going to get this super high bright aquamarine colour. I'm actually going to go off to the left and get an almost white version of it coming in as well. Really, really bright off there. And you'll notice that I kind of group my splodges from the base colour, and the darks go off in a dark direction, the lights go off in a light direction, just so I can always see how they look next to each other. Just a useful tip. So, same thing again, everybody. We're going to go back to our eye layer where we actually paint this in. I'm going to use the lasso tool again, just to select around the eye itself. Now, I'm sure some of you are thinking, why don't you just use a magic wand, Mikey, and you can select all of these areas? Well, the thing is, Magic Wand is amazing and fun and useful, but when it comes to your line art that you've drawn in, it doesn't perfectly meet your line. If you zoom in and look at the detail, sometimes it's a bit grainy and it creates like a bit of fuzz or fluff around the edge and it doesn't quite perfectly sit in. So I like to just mark it out manually each time. But back to basics, let's get our base colour. Let's have our pencil. Go ahead. Meow, fill that in. Do ignore that I just made the airplane noise that you make for babies when you want them to eat some dinner. Meow. Let's get our darker zone. And we're going to follow in another very basic game plan of this. We're going to grab our brush del paint. We've still got it fairly large, very soft, and about 15% opacity. I'm going to just rock it up a little bit to about 20. And we're just going to start to get these strokes in. Now, I'm always doing more at the top than I am as I work down, just so that, again, the top is the darkest zone, just like so. Lovely. And then let's go darker again of that dark layer we've got in here, just right up at the top. And we're going to come back to that, because now I'm going to grab this purple. This is our playing around with the dark colours moment. I'm just going to go on the edge here, and I'm just going to stroke in a tiny bit of purple there, and then a tiny bit of purple around here as well. I'm playing around with this slightly different colour. It's really just going to kind of mess things up in the mix of the colours here. It's really going to just add a bit of fun. So, when you're playing around with Photoshop, have a lot of fun with your colours if you can. It's certainly worth it. I'm just putting that other dark zone back in the top. And then now we're going to go to the lighter areas, up to our super bright one, round about here. Just going to start to create a zone that's much, much lighter as we come down here. Just bring that back a little bit, right up in the top. Lovely, it's getting very, very bright, super, super bright. This is what a Mako eye would look like. And then we're going to go for this almost off-white, highly bright one as well. And I'm just going to really get that zone really bright there. Excellent. Now, what's going on in this side that's a bit more detailed from the other one is we've got a few more things to play around with, really. Now, you'll notice there is this other layer here, this, what would have been a very thick black outline to the eye, where I've just drawn this in. Normally, I fill this in black so that the eye itself has loads of pop, and again, just looks really graphic, really clear and really fun. But in this instance, I'm going to select that, and I'm going to hold down the shift button and create another selection so that they both work together. Select this guy all the way around here, and all the way down to the bottom, and all the way back up around the top. If you follow any of my Sexy Anime Saturday series, take a look. It's where we get your suggestions at home and we create sexy fan art, basically, of common anime or video game characters. But what you'll notice on there is I lasso everything. You have to build up your lasso polygon skills if you want to work in my particular style. Or if you know a better way, get in the comments below, because I'd bloody love to hear it. And now I've got the really dark colour, and if I now use a paintbrush, I'm painting only in these selections. And I'm using that really dark colour to create a really heavy outline for the eye. I'm not completely filling it in, and I will go back to the purple again and just work that round the top as well. Lovely. But you can see now we've really just filled in an eye and given it a bit more pop again. Now what's going on is that we've got another option once more. This pupil in the middle, we're going to, instead of having it black like we've got on the eye on the left, that's really graphic and simple, we're going to ever so slightly invert our colour scheme. Now the pupil really should be black, but you can also just make it really, really dark. So what I'm going to do again is I'm going to go and select this darker of the colours, the almost black, and I'm just going to focus on paintbrushing it from the bottom upwards. Just like so, as dark as I can get it, but leaving just a tiny bit near the top. Excellent. Boom, and now this eye's got all sorts of layer and character going on, but we haven't done anything about the light reflections yet, so this is where things start to come into their own. We're going to go back onto our reflected light layer, And I'm just going to again get this tool in and just create maybe a double bubble situation. So you get one kind of sphere of light around about here, which we're going to go ahead and fill in as white. And then I'm going to make another one that's kind of attached to it, just about here. And we're going to fill that one in as white as well. See how that works. We're going to grab the pencil tool really quickly, just so that it perfectly... I've got that white layer on? I have indeed. Oh, there's a little selection up there. Ignore that. Just going to get this pencil in there and just make sure that meets up perfectly white. And then, now what we can do is maybe something a little bit different. If I get a rectangle, and it's not going to be right here, but I'm going to put it here so that we've got loads of contrast so we can see how we're working. Fill that in with white. And then, I'm actually going to make this into a little bit of a window. So I'm going to use a selection tool right down the middle and hit delete. And then I'm going to use a selection tool right across and hit delete. And then I'm going to select all of it. And I'm going to firstly just move it to around about over here. But then I am going to warp it as well. So we're going to go edit, transform, warp. And this allows us to kind of really reshape things. So I'm going to imagine that this shape is mapped onto the curved surface of the eye. So I'm going to pull the edges kind of down and in a little bit. And this is going to all come back. It's going to come back a bit. This is certainly in. That's going to be a bit more out, as is that. This is all going to come up a bit, like so. Excellent. That makes a bit more shape for it being mapped onto here. I'm also going to drop it to be a little bit smaller now. Scale. Thank you very much. And that's going to sit around about there quite nicely. So, how are we going to just show that off more? We're going to pop back onto the whites of the eyes layer. We're going to use our selection tool to make sure we're selecting all that zone that would be, you guessed it, the white of the eye, round about there. Lovely. Again, I'm just going to grab that soft grey, that soft brush, and just indicate a bit of shadow around the top, just to make sure everything pops out. Then, another thing we can really quickly do, if you want to stay back on your reflected light layer, you can grab the brush again, and maybe just make it really hard as a brush, very small with the strokes. And we're going to pop that opacity up to about 82%. And whilst it's still white, we can follow this line around, this iris line that we've made. And you can just pop in some white strokes if you want. Just a few there. Just to show that there's white light. These strokes need to point in towards the middle of the pupil. We're going to have a go. So just put a few in there. A few in there as well. Just get that in, maybe just a couple there as well. And it's basically just following this ring around, just showing off even more reflections of light. There's all sorts of things you can play around with and do when you want to get the light on your character's eyes and just show that they're really, really cool. But that's another example that I hope you kind of get a feel for. There's a lot of things we can play with. Another thing you can always do, if you wanted, is if we select the highlights here, on the reflected light layer, you can drop the opacity. You can make them even less perfectly see-through, or bring it up a little bit more, just so that it shows that you can still see the eye behind it if you want, or you can leave it on pure bright. We'll play around and see how we feel with it. There's no right or wrong